Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of Wokingham Borough Council's Executive. My name's Stephen Conway. I'm the leader of the Council and the Executive Member for Housing, Partnerships and the Local Plan, and I'll be chairing the meeting. I just really wanted to just begin with a few housekeeping messages, which I think for those of you who've been here before are very familiar to you. Please ensure that any mobile devices or mobile phones are switched off. If you're participating via Teams, and I don't know whether very many people are, then when you're not speaking, if you could mute your microphone, that would be much appreciated. And for everyone's benefit, if you please note that the meeting is currently being webcast live. Now, I will introduce, for those who are unfamiliar with them, the cast around the room. Sitting over in somewhat splendid isolation over there is George Framelico, who is Director of Place and Growth. Online, I think we might have, is that Emma? Yes, there's Emma Cockerell, who's Director of Children's Services. We've also got, I think, Rebecca Bird from the Council's comms team, and both online and in person here is Priya Patel from Democratic Services, and Andrew Moulton, who is the Council's Monitoring Officer and Assistant Director of Governance. And last but by no means least, sitting behind me, I think, is Graham Ebers, who's the Deputy Chief Executive and the Chief Finance Officer. So those are the officers present, and I'm going to leave it to individual executive members to introduce themselves and their roles. And I'm going to start on this occasion with Jordan.
Hello all, I'm Jordan Montgomery, the Executive Member for Environment and Climate Emergency.
Good evening, I'm Mark Ashwell. I'm Executive Member for Business, Economic Development, Sport, Leisure and Arts and Culture.
And I'm Priya Bray. I'm the Lead Member for Children's Services and I'm also Deputy Leader of the Council.
Good evening, I'm Imogen Shepherd-Debay. I am the Executive Member for Finance and Governance.
Good evening, I'm Rachel Bishop-Firth. I'm the Executive Member for Resident Services, Inclusion and Fighting Poverty.
And last but not least, good evening, I'm David Hare. I'm Executive Member for Adult Services, Health and Wellbeing.
Well, thank you everyone. We're missing just one colleague, and that's Paul Fishwick, who unfortunately can't be here this evening. So he will constitute our sole apology for absence. If we can move on then to item 30 on your agenda, and that's the minutes of the previous meeting, which are held on the 26th of September. Is everybody happy that we sign these meetings as an accurate record? Excellent. If you are, I'll do that very thing. There's a little place for me to sign at the end. Priya, thank you. Right, so we move on to item 31. Are there any declarations of interest? I don't think there's anything on the agenda that requires anyone to declare an interest this evening. So we're going to go on to item 32, which is a statement from me. And I want to start with some good news, which I shared with Council last week, but it's, I think, very well worth reiterating. The Empower Consultancy has compiled an index of high-performing councils measured by core service productivity, or, to put it in a different language, outcomes achieved per pound spent. I'm delighted to say that Wokingham is in the top 10 of all councils in England responsible for adults and children's services. We're ranked as number 5. Now, given the low level of core revenue support we receive from central government, the lowest level per head of population of all the councils assessed in Empower's index, this is a very considerable achievement. Our officers are, of course, principally responsible for our success. as I've said many times, and I will say many times more, they are our greatest asset as an organisation. But it is worth noting, I think, that the Municipal Journal, in its analysis of the results, tells us that the top 10 councils had two things in common. First, a culture of expressing gratitude towards hard-working staff, and second, a focus on working with external partners. I think you would agree that both are hallmarks of our approach here at Wokingham. In response to the amended motion passed at last week's council meeting, I wrote to the Chancery of the Exchequer on the government's decision to take winter fuel allowance away from all but those receiving pension credit. The letter was sent to her in advance of Wednesday's budget, but judging by the budget statement and supporting documentation, the government has not reconsidered its position. We must hope that in the weeks and months ahead, the Chancellor and her colleagues reflect further and decide to allow more pensioners on low incomes to qualify. On the budget more generally, our officers are currently reviewing its impact on the Council. As always, there are some positives, and here I'd highlight particularly the commitment to better funding for affordable homes, and some negatives, and perhaps the negatives are more apparent. We will be liable to the increase in employer national insurance contributions, which will have a significant impact on us. And while we'll know more after the announcement of this year's finance settlement for local government in December, at this stage, we have some concerns about the impact of the budget on social care. At a meeting this week between the South East strategic leaders and the local government minister, I argued that the best way to help the National Health Service in the long term was properly funding social care. Unfortunately, the budget itself gave little encouragement in this respect. We'll have to wait and see whether this year's local government finance settlement goes at least some way to remedy the budget's omissions. And then finally, I'd like to end on what I think is a positive note. Everybody is aware that this is Halloween, but rather more importantly, it's the time of Diwali. So I want to finish by saying that I hope the Festival of Lights brightens up your life and brings peace, joy, and prosperity to all of us. Thank you very much. It'd be nice to have a bit of that, wouldn't it? Yes. Right, if we then move on to public question time. And we actually have a public question, and from a familiar face. The MP for Wokingham, Clive Jones. It's very good to see you here, Clive. Do come up to the table. You're familiar with the process, having sat here before. And if you'd just like to ask us your question, that would be very helpful.
Thank you very much, Stephen. And I have to say, before I start my question, it is a real pleasure to be back here. And I do miss the days of sitting around this table with you as the executive and also being on the council. So my question is, I don't think it will come as a surprise if I tell you that as an MP, I receive a number of contacts from parents and carers who are concerned about special educational needs provision for their children. The executive is considering a new SEND and inclusion strategy at this meeting tonight. The strategy is focused on supporting children as early as possible, which I am really pleased to see. Could you please tell me what you see as the biggest challenges to improving the experience of children and young people with SEND in Wokingham, and how you propose to address them?
Could you just mute your phone? Oh, that's lovely, thanks.
Thank you, Clive, and it's a real pleasure to see you here as one of our two MPs. So it's brilliant, even though the question is an interesting one for me, because challenges there certainly are. So my answer to you is, nationally, as was admitted by the previous government, The special educational needs and disability system in England is failing to deliver for children, young people and their families. And as the National Audit Office report on support for children with SEND, which was published last week, made clear, the system is not financially sustainable. And I will be saying more about that report when I introduce the strategy later on. In Wokingham Borough, against this national backdrop of a systemic crisis for our children and young people, we have in the past 2 years been making our best efforts to resolve significant issues for children and young people in accessing education, while tackling the funding deficits that we have been left with, and while striving to deliver good and consistent outcomes for our children and young people. Support for children with SEND requires a whole system approach and is not solely the responsibility of the local authority, but currently this is where much of the accountability sits. With respect to that, the National Audit Office report notes that while local authorities are the ones held to account, we have limited levers to encourage other parts of the system, like schools and health, to change. We are fortunate in Wokingham that our schools and health are now willing partners in addressing the issues, although both have their own financial challenges. The most significant challenge we face is that, like everywhere else, we are seeing rapidly increasing identification of needs, but without matching increases in funding. To exacerbate this, the development of special schools and SEND resource bases, or SEND units, which is specialist provision attached to mainstream schools, in Wokingham had not traditionally kept pace with increasing demand. And this acceleration of needs and a lack of historical investment in SEND have placed enormous pressure on our local system, which did not have the range and volume of specialist provision to meet the needs of the local population. In response, we and our partners have focused not just on increasing that local provision, but on early intervention and prevention, bolstering ordinarily available provision, early years, multi-agency working, and integration of services. We've been fortunate to secure a promise of 2 new special schools from the previous government. Unfortunately, both before the general election and since, we have had indications that the opening of these schools will be delayed from its original date of 2026, which will have a major detrimental impact on our spending deficit, as well as on the children who are due to benefit from them. And finally, I must stress that whatever we do locally as a SEND partnership is very unlikely to be enough to make us financially viable in the long term, unless there is a fundamental national reform to the SEND system, with the right level of funding to deliver consistent outcomes for children with SEND.
Clive, do you have a supplementary?
Stephen. Thank you very much, Prue, for your reply, very extensive reply. I have actually written to the Secretary of State about the delay of these 2 SEND schools and yet to get a proper reply from them. But what else do you think that I can do as a Member of Parliament that will help the Council deliver good quality SEND service to Wokingham's children?
Thank you, Clive. Thank you for writing, first of all. It is quite important to us that we get these schools as early as possible. What else you can do? There are 2 things which I think are pretty crucial. Like a lot of local authorities, I think it's about 107 out of 152, we have a deficit in our SEND system, a big deficit. At the moment, that doesn't sit on the council's books because of the ministerial override that's in place. And that statutory override is due to run until 2026. So anything you can do to ensure or lobby that that override doesn't disappear before the SEND funding is sorted out, it will be really, really helpful, because the minute that goes, a lot of councils will fall over immediately. We won't fall over immediately, but it will bring that debt onto our books, and that's unsustainable in the long term. So if you can stress that to ministers, that we must keep that in place. And the other thing is to keep pressing for a fair settlement for our education system. One of the reasons we're so much in deficit is that we're so badly funded. here. We need a fair settlement. We need that big send funding reform, which is indicated by the National Audit Office report. But within that, we need a fair settlement for working that recognises the cost of what we're trying to deliver. So anything you can do on that will be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Prue. Just to add, if I may, the current statutory override is obviously vital, but it's like the sword of Damocles. It's hanging over our heads, and it could be withdrawn at any time. So we do, I think, need some reassurance that's not going to happen. But we also, as Prue has said, we need a fundamental rethink of the funding of the high needs block. Without that, keeping the statutory overrides useful, but it's not addressing the root cause of our problem.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Clive.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome to stay if you wish to do so, but we'll understand if you have other things you've got to do.
I am going to stay, certainly, until you've done item number 37.
Right, yes, well, that does directly relate to what you've just been talking about. Thank you. Okay, well, we have no other public questions, and I believe we have no member questions, Priya, so we can move straight to item 35, and this is BG Fit, box, we call it Box Fit, at Boxing Gym, and this is on page 15 to 22 of your agenda, and Mark, as the executive member principally responsible, will start on this, but I think Imogen may well want to say a few words also. So Mark, over to you.
That's great. Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, as executive member for Sport and Leisure, it's sort of incumbent on me to present this report and recommendation to you this evening. And I know Imogen will pitch in, thank you. Boxing Fit, BXG, is a gym based in Peach Place, Wokingham Town, and was conceived in 2021 and managed by our council's Sport and Leisure team in our property. Unfortunately, despite many initiatives, the membership and user numbers remain poor. A year ago, the decision was taken to contract our massively achieving leisure partner, Places Leisure, for a 9-month trial period. Despite their considerable and proven professional acumen, the membership uptake has not improved. During these periods, the gym has been operating at a loss, and the test period with Places Leisure has demonstrated that it will not cover its operating costs at any point in the future. And this loss cannot be sustained in our current financial position. Imogen, do you want to just sort of pitch in there, please?
All right, sure. So this indeed was something that was started under the previous administration, and I have no problem with the council trying out new and different ideas. But when we took over the executive of this council, Mark's predecessor, Ian, flagged up this boxing gym as having problems, as it was not making anywhere close to the income that was expected, and it was therefore running at a loss that the council as a whole had to subsidise. We asked our officers to look at alternatives and there were discussions with private providers. And last year we agreed to let Places Leisure, our leisure contractor, to have a go at making the gym work. And to be fair, they have put in some time and improved the situation. But I'm afraid the current levels of membership means that it's not going to be viable. And we cannot possibly carry on supporting this as a loss. So I'm comfortable in saying that we can move these services to other locations and that we really tried to make it work, but subsidising this location at nearly £200,000 a year, it is really unaffordable in the long term, especially with our current financial situation. So I'm happy to support whatever actions we take.
Prue.
Yeah. I just want to add one small bit in it because it has been used as part of the support for young people, as part of the youth justice system, and that has been taken into account. So Places Leisure will be running that provision, and in fact in some ways in a better way, in that it will be running at more locations, which makes it available for more young people who need it. So just covering that bit off.
Yeah, thank you for that, because it is important that we we ensure there are appropriate mitigation measures in place so that we can offer alternative provision, and that clearly has been happening. So, did you want to add anything, Mark?
Yes, please. Yeah. So I'm basically asking you to please approve the closure of the gym and have a phased relocation of his existing membership, and that's important. So we need to give officers time to plan and progress and support the membership to alternative services, although a lot of those plans are in place. And to re-let the space at Peach Place to a commercial provider at market rates.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark and Imogen. So if colleagues, you could turn to page 15, where the recommendation is in 3 parts, as you can see. Unless anybody else wants to say anything further, I suggest we go to a vote on that recommendation. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. That's unanimous. Right, thank you very much. We now move on to item 36, Wokingham Borough Council Community Lottery. This is on page 23 of your agenda. The report starts, and this is Imogen who's going to present.
Thank you, Stephen. This lottery is actually really good news for our local charities and our residents who I'm sure would like an easy way to donate to local charities within Wokingham Borough area. It gives them a chance to win some prize money while they do it as well. Gatherwell runs this service very successfully for over 100 councils around the country, including Bracknell, Royal Borough, Windsor, Maidenhead and Surrey Heath, who have only reported positive outcomes. They will absorb the cost from the purchase of the tickets and manage the risk around the prize money. They also work with GambleAware to identify and manage any problem gamblers. This report is just here for us tonight to agree that we're happy to go ahead with the scheme. We have not yet set the criteria for what charities and organisations can really benefit from this, as that would be part of our next steps, but the intention is that they would need to be local within the borough and residents would be able to choose a primary organisation to donate to if they wish. There is a small initial outlay of staff and commitment, but the evidence of this service running in other councils is that it works really well and will benefit our community. So I'm happy to recommend it goes forward.
Thank you very much, Imogen. Are there any points anyone wishes to raise? Rachel.
Super. Thank you very much. It's absolutely great to see a new source of funding coming on stream for good causes locally. You did mention some of the steps that you're taking to protect people in the community who might be vulnerable to a gambling addiction. I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit more about what we're going to be doing to protect residents.
Sure. I mean, Gatherwell is part of GambleAware. They obviously will monitor the number of tickets that people will buy. I believe there's a limit of 20 tickets per person per week, and they will identify anyone who might be considered to be a problem gambler. This type of gambling is not considered to be high risk. You know, if somebody's a serious gambler, that's probably not where they're coming. But they will refer people to GambleAware and for appropriate help if they feel there is a problem. And as I said, they manage this with other councils all around the country and with very little problem. So.
That's brilliant, thanks. It's great to hear about the steps that you're taking.
Yeah, I think it's very good to know that there are those safeguards in place. So thank you for that. I think this, as Imogen said, is a good news story. It is going to benefit many of our partners in the voluntary and charitable sector who are really important to us. So I think this will be good for them. And I think I'm very pleased to see this initiative coming before us. So unless there are any other comments, could colleagues approve the 2 recommendations on page 23 of your agenda? Jumping the gun, Jordan. Is everybody happy with that? So those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. Right. Okay, thank you. So we now move on to item 37, which begins on page 29 of your agenda. Now, this is effectively a 2-part report. It's Special Educational Needs and Disability and Inclusion Strategy and All-Age Autism Strategy. And the division of labour, I think, between executive members is that Prue, as Executive Member for Children's Services, is going to present the first part of this, the SEND inclusion strategy, And the second part, the all-age autism strategy, is going to be presented by David. So Prue, to begin with.
Thank you, Stephen. And this is going to be a slightly longer introduction than we'd normally have to there's a lot to say about it. So earlier on, you heard me replying to a question from Clive Jones, one of our MPs. And in that reply, I described some of what we're doing locally to improve the service delivered by our local SEND partnership. And I'm very pleased that the strategy was co-produced with our partners. I mentioned Health and Schools earlier, who also have responsibility for services, but another very important partner is our Parent Carer Forum, SEND Voices, who act as our critical friend, and they've also been involved with this. There's a lot in the strategy that I'm really pleased to see. A lot about service improvements, better provision, earlier intervention, better support, and so on. But it'd be foolish to try to pretend that all will be well if we just deliver what's in the strategy. It would be ignoring the elephant in the room, which is the accumulated and still accumulating deficit in the high needs block, which is where SEND provision is funded from. When I answered Clive's question earlier, I referred to a report on SEND from the National Audit Office that was released on the 22nd of October. And I want to talk more about that report now because it shows the stark reality of what local areas are up against with regard to providing for children with additional needs. The Department for Education's 2024-25 budget for local authorities, schools and colleges spending on educational support for children with higher needs was 10.4 billion. By the end of the 25-26 financial year, the DfE estimates the cumulative deficit on that budget will be 4.6 billion. That is a huge figure. Despite all that money, and perhaps because as the figures show it is nowhere near enough to pay for what is needed, the National Audit Office found that since 2019, there has been no consistent improvement in outcomes for children and young people with SEN. And surprise, surprise, they found that families and children lack confidence in an SEN system that often falls short of statutory and quality expectations. The National Audit Office also found that the DfE does not know with confidence how much capacity should be planned and where to meet future needs. So again, surprise, surprise, with that lack of understanding of what capacity is needed, they found that state special schools are over capacity and that leads to use of much more expensive independent schools at an estimated £61,500 a space compared to £23,900 in state special schools. And having looked at the growth in demand and the funding gap, the National Audit Office found, and this is a direct quote, "If unreformed, the SEN system is financially unsustainable." They do note that, and I'm quoting again, the DfE has taken steps to tackle local authorities' immediate financial pressures. Among the steps the DfE has taken is to introduce the safety valve programme, which writes off part of some local authorities' deficits over 5 or 6 years, provided that the local authorities in question take steps to bring their spending down to a nil in-year deficit by the end of that period. We are part of that programme, along with roughly 38 other councils. But even with these steps, the National Audit Office concludes, again a direct quote, "but these will not provide a sustainable system." What is the scale of the problem? Well, there are 152 authorities who are responsible for SEND. And this financial year, the LGA is reporting that 107 of them, of us, are expecting a cumulative deficit at the end of the financial year, ranging from 0.2 million to 148 million in the local authorities, with a median of 15 million. And in case you're wondering where we are in that, we are a bit above the median, although we are one of the smaller authorities. Now, I'm not an accountant, and neither are most people listening. I think almost all people listening, except Graham and possibly Andrew behind me. So I'm going to be non-technical here, and hopefully you'll be able to understand the point. At the moment, that deficit is held in a separate pot. thanks to a ministerial override which prevents the deficit from being included in the council's main accounts. The override was originally due to end in 2023, but it was extended due to the impact on councils of removing it. It is now due to end in 2026. When it ends, local authorities will become liable for the money. Or rather, I should say, local authorities will become liable for the whole of the hole in the funding. And what does that all mean? Well, 74 authorities responded to a survey commissioned by the Local Government Association and the County Council Network. And a quarter of them said that when the override ends, they would be insolvent within a year. And a further quarter said they would be insolvent within 3 years. And just to give you some reassurance, at least, I don't think we would be one of those who will be insolvent within a year. The National Audit Office report recommends root and branch reform, including, again, I'm going to quote directly, as a matter of urgency, work with the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government and HM Treasury to share with local authorities its plans for ensuring each local authority can achieve a sustainable financial position once the statutory override ends in 25-26, including how cumulative deficits will be treated and any wider financial impact managed. And I really hope that the government listens, but I'm not altogether convinced they will. Now that I've got all that doom and gloom out of the way, the National Audit Office has a number of recommendations aimed at improving SEND services, and looking at our strategy itself, we are doing a lot of those things. Increasing our state school provision, intervening early, working hard with our schools on mainstream inclusion. And these are the right things to do, not just because they husband our resources, but because they benefit children and young people. So I'm pleased to present the strategy to you, even though the situation for SEND is really tough. And I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
Not a question as such, but just perhaps an amplification of something you were saying there, Prue, and then I think there is a genuine question from Rachel. But my point really, and it does relate back to something Clive said earlier on about writing to the Secretary of State to try and get some movement on when we're going to get a firm commitment for dates for the 2 new SEND schools. Those 2 new SEND schools are part of a wider strategy we've been pursuing of trying to increase in-borough provision of SEND, which is vital both for the families and the young people affected, because if they have shorter journey times, life is more tolerable for them. But it's also vital for the council because clearly the shorter those journey times, then the less pressure on our home to school transport budget. So it is really important to us that this initiative, which we've taken to try and increase significantly the amount of SEND provision within the borough, is allowed to bring those benefits both to the young people and their families and to the council's finances. So thank you for the efforts you've been putting in, Clive, and more power to your elbow, as they say. Thank you. Rachel.
Thank you very much. It wasn't actually a question, it was more of a comment from an inclusion point of view to say how welcome this strategy is. We aim as a borough, obviously, to be inclusive for all of our residents. A lot of people with autism have some extremely strong skill sets, particularly in analytical areas, in focus and in logic, and they make a tremendous contribution to the life of the borough, particularly in the IT and allied industries. And it's really important that we do everything that we can to include them and to support them, and referring back to what Prue was saying, to support children with autism to be the best that they can be at school, give them the best start in life. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Rachel. In fact, we're preempting David, who hasn't yet had a chance to present the all-age autism strategy. So David, over to you.
Thank you very much. And certainly some of what I was going to say has been said. But anyway, I'd like to present the all-age autism strategy. Again, it's been co-produced, both with health and with the voluntary bodies which work in this area. And I think always that's very important, that it is all people working together. As Stephen has said, one of the marks of a good council is work with partners, and certainly this has come not just from us but from partners as well. It's been to consultation again, it's been to consultation with a wide range of people, and most responses have been very positive. Some wording had to change just a little bit, but otherwise that was very positive as well. I'd like especially to thank Sophie Kendall, who's the autism lead, and also Emma Cockrell, who's the lead officer for this, because both of them have worked hard. I know Emma's only been here, well, for a little while now, but she's been very, very good at making sure that this goes forward. I was talking to Matt Pope, and he said that it had got to a bit of a sticky place where it wasn't going forward, and Emma has pushed it forward, and I'd like to thank her very much for doing that. I think as you read it, most people will see that it's very important that we work together with other people for the good of everyone in Wokingham, and that includes people with autism. And as Rachel said, it's being inclusive. It's not a different lot of people, it's everyone working together, and that's what's so important. So I would recommend that we approve this as well as the SEND strategies, because I think they're very important to come to this council.
Thank you, David, and I'm sure we'd all want to second your thanks to the officers who played a key role, not just in the all-age autism strategy, but also with producing the final version of the Wokingham Send and Inclusion strategy. So our recommendation, colleagues, is on page 29, and it's fairly straightforward. We're asked to approve these two new strategies. Could I ask if you're in favour, you show. And I'm very pleased to say that's everyone. Thank you very much. So we now move on to people strategy. And this begins on page 147 of your agenda. And it's going to be Rachel who presents this to us.
Super, thank you very much, Stephen. So I'm very pleased to be able to present Wokingham Borough Council's first ever people strategy. Over the last 2 years, the Council's HR department has been on a journey to strengthen the strategic service which it gives to the rest of the Council in order to ensure that we have a strong and motivated workforce delivering the best possible services to our residents. Development of a people strategy is a critical step in this journey. It aligns with the Council plan and the new Wokingham vision, the Council's strategic priorities and our ambition to become a Marmot Borough. It lays out at a high level how the Council will attract, retain, develop and reward colleagues. The Council aims to be an employer of choice, attracting and retaining excellent people and providing outstanding development programmes. This in turn will give us the right workforce for delivering an outstanding service to our residents. The people strategy is built on 4 commitments. Firstly, we care about our people. This is about supporting our people so that they stay safe and healthy at work, they enjoy the work that they do, and to be able to get the work-life balance that they need to be able to give their best at work every day. The second commitment is that we share. This is about a shared vision, shared responsibility and ownership, shared information and insight, and a shared celebration of success. A council where everyone works together to deliver to residents is an effective council. The third commitment is that we learn. We want every employee to have the skills that they need to deliver great services, and this means putting into place programmes to develop our people and to manage their talents. The fourth and final commitment is that we belong. Employees who know that they are an essential and valued part of an organisation are employees who deliver what the customer, in this case the resident, needs. This means that we need to treat people with respect. We need to listen to our employees as well as communicating to them. We need to ensure that we understand and include everyone in a diverse workforce and provide them with opportunities to grow and continually improve how they deliver to residents. Organising around these principles will help the Council to establish a consistent and effective approach to workforce policies. This strategy has been a major piece of work. It was developed through extensive consultation with colleagues. I'd like to give my thanks to everyone, both within HR and the general workforce, who's contributed to this. It's been considered and passed by the Personnel Board, and I hope that we can all vote in favour of this tonight.
Thank you very much, Rachel. And just 2 points, if I may. First of all, you said at the very beginning, this is our first ever people strategy. And I suppose the big surprise is that it's taken so long to actually produce one. So I'm very pleased that that has now happened. And you quite rightly thanked all of the officers involved. And I'm sure we all want to second those thanks, but also to thank you for the role you've played in helping move this forward. And my second point really relates to another point you made about how this links with other parts of the architecture of council plans and ambitions. And it clearly is connected with the council's own plan. It's clearly connected with our ambitions to become a Marmot borough where public health and the council's contribution to public health is at the centre of the way we think about things. But it also very much connects with the community vision, which was approved at the last council meeting. We approved our role in that community vision. So this is all coming together in a very good and well-structured way. And this particular strategy, the people strategy, focuses on our workforce and what we can do to ensure that that workforce is happy, productive, and continues to contribute as well as it has done. So thank you very much, everyone. We have a very simple recommendation on page 147, which is that we approve the people strategy 2025 to 30. And please, can everyone show their approval? There we go. Thank you very much. Excellent. Right, we're making encouraging progress. And now we move on to item 39, which is the first of a suite of reports to be presented by Imogen. This one is the Revenue Monitoring Report for Q2 of 2024-25, and it starts on page 163 of your agenda. Imogen.
Thank you, Stephen. Yes, I mean, this is the update on our progress of this year's budget, and we have now completed the second quarter. The items of note are the General Fund Reserve and the Housing Revenue Accounts and the Dedicated Schools Grant. We are in the process of finding over 11 million this year from our existing council services just to stand still, and the current financial year is a tough challenge, and we have been limited, of course, by what funding we can raise. At the moment, we are predicting a small overspend of 785,000, but we can try and recover the overspend throughout this year. There are a number of local authorities who are issuing warnings about having to issue Section 114 notices, which effectively is considered council bankruptcy. It is therefore critical that we keep the control of our spending. The Dedicated Schools Grant problem affects many councils around the country, as Prue has already explained, and it is largely being driven by the needs of children with special educational needs. And I think I'll ask Prue to speak on that item, but the interest payments from this puts considerable pressure on our revenue. The other thing is, obviously, part of the small numbers, the second thing is in recommendation 2, we're asking to create a new fee for businesses and licensed venues for advertising in our registrar's ceremonies brochure. And this will be marketed to people who are looking for venues to hold wedding ceremonies, and there are businesses who have expressed an interest in being part of that brochure. I think I shall leave this for other people to ask questions, I think, at this point. Thank you.
Prue, you were invited to come in, so I think it would be churlish not to let you.
So the Dedicated Schools Grant is where this deficit lurks, that isn't on our own books. You've got the figures in this report on page 166, 167. So you can see that if we didn't have the safety valve programme, things would be worse. We've got a lot of things, work streams in play that are working, but the pressure, the upward pressure is still there. So it's not coming down quite as fast as we would like, although it is coming down. And I just refer you to all the things I said earlier. We can't do this without a reform of special educational needs funding. Now, something was announced in the budget yesterday, I think £1 billion. We don't know what we'll see of that, but the impression given was that it was going towards deficits rather than being additional funding. I can't imagine our share of that will be anything like enough to wipe off our accumulated deficit. But even if it was, it wouldn't help in the long term, because if the structural reform isn't made, the deficit will just build up again.
Yeah.
So it's a worrying problem. I know that it worries Graham, and it worries me, and it worries Emma, and it worries Susan Parsonage. But we can only do what we can do, and we have to keep pressuring the government to do something about this structural reform, because we're not the only council in this position. Nearly all councils with responsibility for this are in the same boat.
I think
like
it
this.
almost certainly worries Imogen and the rest of us
Yes.
too. Those are really very important points, and thank you very much for reiterating the point about the need for fundamental reform of the way SEND funding is organised. I want to, I'm afraid, move from that very big issue to a relatively small one, which is the second recommendation. Am I right, Imogen, in seeing this as part of the Council's commercialisation agenda or commercial agenda, trying to ensure we take advantage of what opportunities there are to add to our revenue stream through these new initiatives?
I think we have to. I mean, you know, if there are opportunities for us to create revenue, and particularly like this is basically offering advertising for businesses, we would be stupid not to. We really should capitalise on these things.
Yeah.
And as far as I can tell, these businesses are happy to be part of this. So.
And there are others that are currently being considered, other ways of doing the same thing. So thank you very much, Imogen, and thank you, Prue, for your contribution as well. If there are no other questions or observations, we can go to the vote on the revenue budget monitoring Q2, with the just final comment that we will be working to try to bring down that in-year deficit by the end of year. So thank you very much, everyone. All those in favour of accepting this report and noting our current position and approving the creation of this new fees and charges to business. That's great. Thank you. That was everyone. So we move on to the second of your succession of reports, Imogen. This is capital monitoring for the same period, Q2 2024-25. And this begins on page 177 of the agenda.
Yeah, these two come as a pair, obviously revenue and capital. So this is now an update of the progress of our capital monitoring as the second quarter of the financial year. And if you look at the long list of things going on here, there are some interesting budget adjustments, such as an additional £845,000 to enable the additional school places at St Crispin's and Piggott School, an additional £309,000 for the wraparound early years care, an additional £100,000 for residential children homes, £324,000 for additional work at Robert Piggott's infant school, and £528,000 for upgrades to traffic signals around various locations. And many of these items are being funded by grants, or part funded by grants, but a lot of these are investor save type programmes where, you know, we make more school places in the borough, it saves us on educational transport, and we're able to educate our children locally. The last thing, an additional £889,000 in the capital budget towards the purchase of waste and recycling bags, because we've obviously done so well in dishing out waste and recycling bags that we need to bring it forward and have some more. Yeah, I think that's basically the last of it. Yeah.
Thank you. I don't know whether you wanted to say anything, Jordan, on the success with the waste recycling bags, the fact we've run out and we need to purchase more.
Well, I know there was a period there that I had, I think, 15 different messages from both officers and councillors requesting more, going out to all the various hubs because they kept flying off the shelves, which can only be a positive thing.
Indeed it can. That's excellent. Thank you. Prue?
A lot of the items in the recommendation listed are children's services items. I think probably this is the point at which that both David and I went to talk to Overview and Scrutiny about next year's budget. And many of these items are multi-year items, so
yes.
they're in next year's budget as well. And they found nothing that they wished to query, and in fact congratulated us on the state of the budget. So I think we are doing the right sort of schemes, as Imogen said, invest to save, or to provide school places, to provide those essential services, and a lot of it is funded by external funding, including the donation which has gone to the Robert Pigott School. So that is a improvement to that school, which eventually they have found the funding for, and we have taken on for them. So it's no cost to the council, but will be a very big benefit to the school.
Thank you, Imogen. A last word to you.
Sure, I think I'd just like to thank the officers for putting all this together, to be honest, because that's a lot. This is a lot of work. So
It is.
yeah.
It is. It is. And I think both of these reports, both on the revenue and the capital, demonstrate the enormous efforts that are being made to ensure money is spent wisely and effectively, and that we give good value for money in all that we do. And I'd like to, again, emphasise the importance of investing to save in capital terms, but a lot of the work that's been done on prevention and early intervention on the revenue side, which will help us enormously downstream in saving money, as well as producing better outcomes for the people who need the services we provide. So thank you for that, Imogen. Can I ask everyone, unless there's any other comments, everyone to show their approval of the recommendations in relation to the capital monitoring? And we've got 3 fundamental or substantive recommendations, the third one breaking down into all of those components that Imogen went through. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much, everyone. That's carried unanimously. And then we move on to something that is also Imogen's responsibility, but takes us slightly away from monitoring of Q2. And this is risk management policy and guidance, which starts on page 187 of your agenda. Imogen, over to you.
To put it simply, this report covers our internal decision-making processes around risk management and is an important part of the Council's governance. The risk management policies have to be reviewed annually, and this report has also been to our Audit Committee in September this year. The report sets out the Council's overall approach to risk management, and it outlines the scope and principles of risk management applied by this Council, as well as setting out the roles and responsibilities of the individuals who are involved in this process. The review has been conducted against the Treasury's updated Orange Book Management of Risk Principle Concepts 2023, and the policy guidelines that underpin the work of the risk management champions in each directorate, who support the managers to turn the policy and guidance into an effective way of working with risk management that supports the Council to achieve its objectives and deliver both the best outcomes for residents. There have been some minor changes to the policy this year, including tidying up the language and adding attendance at the Audit Committee of Internal Audit. The only changes to the risk management guidance are to include the recording of the status of the mitigating actions that users of the risk management registers can determine if those actions are on course to be delivered by the target date, and an introduction to section 13 highlighting the available support of sources of further information. But I think apart from that, I can only really thank the officers for their work in doing it, and those on the Audit Committee who've been through it all.
Thank you. Yes, only the Treasury could come up with the title Orange Book Management of Risk Principles and Concepts. Thank you. Are there any comments or observations or questions anyone wishes to make? I think this is if I hardly dare say it, a formulaic item on the agenda, so I don't think it probably necessitates any great debate. But thank you very much, Imogen. All those in favour of the recommendation on page 187, which is very simple, to approve the risk management policy and guidance. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. And I think that brings the meeting to a close. We have conducted all the business. So thank you very much, everyone, indeed, for your attendance. Right.